Hello everyone, and welcome to AXSChat today. Today we have a special guest, Elizabeth Patterson, joining us, and I'm going to have Elizabeth introduce herself in just a moment. Also, my partner, Antonio Santos, is joining us from Ireland. I'm joining us from a rainy day in Virginia, and Neil Milliken is not joining us today because he is celebrating an anniversary. So welcome to AXSChat. So, Elizabeth, I know I took the easy way out and I just called you Elizabeth Patterson, but really that's not your full name. So will you give us your full name, tell us where you're joining, and just give us a little bit of information about your life?
All right. Hi, Deborah. I know that you also celebrated an anniversary yesterday, right?
Yes, 34 years.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you.
I'm Elizabeth Patterson. Yes, congratulations. Elizabeth Patterson, and I'm the founder and executive director of the Girls Education Initiative of Ghana, and I'm calling with you right now from Ghana in Kumasi. I'm in my office in Kumasi.
Excellent.
So it's a pleasure to join for today's chat.
Yes, I had the pleasure of interviewing you on my radio program, and you have a beautiful story to tell, a story of when life throws things at you, you know, truly the old saying of when you have lemons, you make lemonade. So it's a beautiful story. I also know that you are a very humble woman and get nervous in interviews and stuff. So we appreciate that you are letting us film you and talk about your life. Because I know that's hard for you. So we really, really appreciate it.
Yes.
So
thank you very much. Speaking of being nervous, I recently had to do
go ahead, Elizabeth.
I recently had to do a presentation for the U.S. Embassy, and the nerves were so spot on. And likewise, the last time we spoke for the podcast, I was equally nervous. But okay, so about me in a nutshell, I'm Elizabeth. I was born here in Ghana almost 32 years ago, and I can't believe that. When I was 10 years old, my family in 1995 left Ghana and went to the United States because my mom luckily won the visa lotto. And then my parents were very much, I would say, middle class to just getting themselves up there. They were working class folks, both worked in banks, and my sister and I questioned why the family was leaving our comforts here in Ghana. And I remember very distinctly, my parents just kept saying, you girls will have a better education outside of Ghana. And not to say that Ghana's education system is bad, but it has its ills, and there are things that might.
Okay, so as you can.
We lost the connection. Let's see
yes,
if there's a way for us to return back to the conversation, because
I agree.
I think it's worth it to continue. So what I asked you, Deborah, is how were able to find Elizabeth on social? What was the point of connection?
Yes, and I agree. We know that since she's joining from Ghana, she's probably going to have, you know, some Wi-Fi cut in and out, and so she will join us again. But I spoke at the United Nations, and I have a mutual friend that is doing a lot of work with. She's a millennial herself, and her name is Harris Melendez, and she. I told her that I wanted to do a series on millennials with disabilities that were making a difference in the world. And she introduced me to Elizabeth, and Elizabeth has a very, very powerful story. I hope that, you know, her Wi-Fi does allow her to come back on, because she has a really beautiful story, and it looks like we're getting her back. And so as this happens, this is just part of recording. And Elizabeth, we're going to continue right where we left off. And Elizabeth, if it's easier for you to not have your video on, just go ahead and talk, because our audience has gotten to see your beautiful face, and we have, you know, your picture live. So we can, if it's easier to talk to you just by voice, that is not a problem for our audience.
Thank you. It disconnected for a second.
Yes, yes. So we
I'm turning the camera off, but
yeah, it might be better for you. So go ahead and pick up your story. So your parents are moving you from Ghana to the United States because they want their daughters to have a better education.
Yeah, and both my parents have, I think, a year or two of tertiary education. So they always felt like had they had more education, they would be doing so much better than they already did or are doing. So they wanted that for us. And that's how we ended up in the US. And so going to the US, we transitioned our lives and everything was going along very fine. And I was going to a boarding school in Pennsylvania. And unlucky for me, one day in my sophomore year, I was 18 years old. Sophomore, about to, junior year actually, going to take the SATs and enter college. I was in this horrific car accident, which has left me paralyzed on the left side of my body. The accident ended up with a traumatic brain injury, and that affected, well, it was on the right side, so it affects my mobility on my left side. So I don't have, for coming up on 13 years in April next year, I would not have used my left hand and walk with a noticeable limp. So that's my story. So out of all of that, I was in a coma for about 6 weeks. And then slowly but surely, I came out of it and decided to go back. Well, I got tutored and graduated from high school, and then decided to start college as a part-time student, and then eventually got my master's in 2014. And long story short, after the master's, I came to Ghana and founded GEIG, the Girls Education Initiative of Ghana, to offer academic and financial support for girls so they could go to school, as well as provide support for kids with disabilities within the education sphere here in Ghana.
And Elizabeth, I know that one thing that we're going to do, and I'm sending a link to Antonio, is we're going to put your podcast episode where you really deeply do a deep dive into your story on AXSChat website so that people can listen to your story. So I'll make sure that Antonio has a link to the program. But so your parents had great hope for you and your sister, and they came to the United States for a better life and a better education. And then you experienced this horrible accident. And do you mind just sharing? I know that if people want to know a lot more about your story, they'll be able to go to the radio program. But can you just explain a little bit about what happened during the car accident, and if you're comfortable, and the journey that took you from there to where you are now? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So the accident, I don't have any memory of it whatsoever. But I've been told various versions of it. I've been told by some people that we were driving and it was raining, and so that caused the driver to maybe panic, or the vehicle to, I don't know, react to the fact that it was raining or what have you, rain and then driving a van, that anything could happen. And then other people have also said that we were driving and then a deer crossed the road, and then that caused the driver to also kind of want to veer off, and then the van collapsed. And so they say that the van flipped upside down, or flipped on its side, and then everyone got thrown out of the van. And unfortunately, I was stuck in the van from the waist down, and the van crushed my upper body, especially my head, with a part of my brain coming out from the head and then my skull fractured, and so I had to be rushed to the hospital because at the time that all this happened, I was pronounced dead. So I rushed to the hospital, and yes, doctors can be amazing, right? So they did everything they could. Took part of my skull out so I could get oxygen back to my brain, and moved me to the Children's Hospital of Pennsylvania or Philadelphia, where I spent the rest of my junior year of high school and a good part of my senior year. And then throughout that whole journey, as I mentioned, I was getting, I couldn't speak for about maybe 2 months, and I was in a coma for 6 weeks. And when I came out of it, everything was just, I was confused as to why. I always tell people I was so confused as to why my family, we were thinking about moving from our apartment in Brooklyn, and I was questioning why my family had decided to move to a hospital room, you know, and it was a lot of confusion, like nothing was making sense. So I don't know where you want me to end with that journey, but eventually
you had to relearn everything, right? You had to relearn everything.
Yeah. Yes, definitely a lot of relearning and just rewiring of my brain to, I guess, learn to speak, and then rewiring to learn to walk. And if you meet me, I walk with a noticeable limp, and I'm gonna share this because this just happened today here in Ghana, and it will give a different perspective of how things are. Like what myself and one of the managers for my mom's company had to go to the Central Police Station this morning so I could do fingerprints for some documents. And when we got there, the gentleman who was receiving us just saw me walking in, and he says to my manager, the manager who is with us, says, "Well, why didn't you tell me the person who you were talking about is sick?" And I was like, "Who, me?" Like, and he just honestly, he really pissed me off. He was just like, "Why didn't you tell me that he's sick? We could have come to the car." And I said, "You and I, who is, like, of the two of us, who's more sick than the other person?" And then he started trying to justify what he was saying. And I said, "I run my own organization and I help my mom manage her business. And so of the two of us, I don't know who's more sick, or in your mind, you know." And he just stopped, and I was like, "You know what? I think you need to apologize for what you just said to me." And I get emotional when people make those, and I think you could hear it in my voice, when people make those absurd comments about something that they have no idea about. And I don't fault him because it's a cultural thing here in Ghana. When people think of disability, they feel as though you are not supposed to be able to do anything at all for your life. And so I went in, and then, as you know, Deborah, I don't have movement of my left arm, right? And so to do the fingerprints with my left hand, the man was finding it difficult, and he was like, "How can I help you? Do you want to sit?" And I said, well, he said to me, "Can you stand?" And I was like, "Did you not see me walk into the room? Why are you asking me if I could stand?" So anyway, I feel like I'm dragging on with that story because it's so fresh in my mind.
Well, I think it's a powerful story. So this gentleman decided that he underestimated you, and we don't like to be underestimated, right?
Yeah. And I think, I mean, a lot of times I ask my mom, in spite of everything that I've been through, why do people still, like, feel bad for me or feel sad for me? It's only because I bet you if my injury was what it is, the brain injury as it is, right? I don't think people would see me as limiting as. Sorry.
No.
Hello?
Yeah.
It's technology. We can still hear you. Yeah. I think it's always hard. when people underestimate us. And I know that my colleague Antonio has a question for you, Elizabeth, but I just think that your story is so powerful, and I appreciate that you, you know, because people with disabilities, I think, are underestimated all over the world every single day. And I think sometimes in the United States, we like to think, and maybe in the UK, that we're more evolved. And yet I believe that what you just went through, well, she's sick. Somebody underestimating you, I think it happens every single day in the US as well. And people look at a person with a disability, especially if it is a physical disability, and they just assume that you're less than. And I'm glad that you get emotional and help them understand that you are a powerful woman and don't underestimate me. But let me turn it over to Antonio. Antonio?
No, thank you, Deborah. I'm curious to say, you know, from how you can describe the current situation, how Ghana and the government is dealing with kids with disabilities. Are they, you know, how they are classifying them, and what type of rights in terms of education do they have? Are they attend special schools, or they are mixed with the regular schools? Can you provide us a picture of that, please?
Okay, so in Ghana, I know for a fact that they passed an inclusion bill, or an inclusive education bill, earlier this year, and I've been in Ghana for about 2.5 years. I've gone to a special school in quotes, and it was deplorable. Like, being there, I felt really sad and bad for the kids. And culturally, when we think of disability here, we just think of people in wheelchairs. And yeah, we just automatically think of people in wheelchairs or crutches or something physical. But 2 of my girls, as part of GIG, are dyslexic. They're mildly dyslexic and severely dyslexic. And for those students, when I first met with the heads of schools, they were just saying, "Oh no, they're stupid. They're not trying hard enough. Like, if she tried harder, she would be a really brilliant student." But it just took us as an organization, and me as a person who knows of people who have learning difficulties, to actually get these 2 students assessed and diagnosed, because I empathize with them and I know what it's like to not be able to learn as well as everybody else, or with the traditional ways that people are learning. And so, to answer your question more concretely, there are special schools, but they're very not patronized. And if you are disabled in Ghana, a lot of things are not accessible to you. I believe that there is Act 715 of our Constitution mandates that all buildings have to be accessible, or have an elevator, a ramp, or something that would allow a person like me to be able to enter and exit the building easily. But that act expired, I believe, late last year or earlier this year. And there are so many buildings in this country that who I think of myself as a very capable person when it comes to my physical mobility. I can't like go past 3 or 4 floors of some of these government buildings or other civilian buildings in general. So the laws are there, but they're not being implemented.
Okay, so,
and for those students and people who have, go ahead.
no, so you were mentioned something now very important that we addressed in this chat before. That, you know, we had several guests who have dyslexia, who were diagnosed when they were kids. One of them was, their parents were told, "Oh, he's not going to be anyone in life," and today he managed a university in the United States. So, what type of work?
Yes.
What type of work could be done needs to be done with teachers for them to be more open, or at least to be able to recognize those cases and be able to put those students in the right direction?
So when I first learned that two of my students were dyslexic, I bought maybe every book on Kindle or on Amazon that I could find on dyslexia, just to educate myself on the learning difference. And so for me, I would say that a teacher who is teaching students with dyslexia or other learning differences or disabilities, I would ask that proper training be done for them, proper education be done for them, especially when they're in teacher training or getting certified for their degrees. I believe that a lot of the teacher training that happens here doesn't include kids with special needs or learning differences. And so when they encounter these students, they just feel as though, okay, so she's stupid, or he is stupid, and they just brush it aside. Or because we're teaching so much to the test for the students to, at the end of the year, to be able to pass off to another grade, we're brushing off and leaving those students who may have struggled behind. So I believe that our school system and our teachers need to maybe insist on smaller class sizes. Not maybe, they need to insist on smaller class sizes so they could focus on every student's learning need. And also, I've never been in a classroom in Ghana where there's, maybe in the special schools, and the other special schools that I haven't visited, there are, but I used to be a teacher in New York, and this was my firsthand experience with, I think, push in and pull out for kids who learn differently or have learning disabilities. While there was a lead teacher in the room, there was always a special education teacher working with the student who had a learning difference. So they would either slow it down or take them with a whole different curriculum so these students could understand what everybody else was grasping. So I believe that it would be a beautiful thing if Ghana and maybe globally more of us started adopting these kinds of methods so we can include all learners in our education system.
Can you talk us about the work that your organization is currently working and the context of your organization in fighting for the rights of girls and kids with disabilities?
Okay, so my organization, the Girls Education Initiative of Ghana, or GEIG, has been in Ghana for, we're going to be 3 years in January. We've been here, I guess, about 2.5 years, and we've been supporting 12 girls from the Greater Accra and the Ashanti regions, providing them with financial scholarships so they could actually afford to pay tuition and go to school. Supplementary academics such as, supplementary support such as Saturday classes, weekend sessions, weekends are Saturdays, after school tutoring, one-on-one individual tutoring when they need test preparation, and leadership development and mentorship. And hopefully soon we'll have our public service program, which will allow the girls to be able to have internship opportunities and community service opportunities.
Elizabeth, you might want to.
With respect,
you might just want to turn Skype off because you don't need it right now since we're on Google. So I don't know if it'll still ring on you, but that might help.
It might, yeah.
It might, or
right.
it might start ringing anyway.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
So with respect to disability work, because of our 2 girls who are dyslexic, we've been strong advocates for inclusion of all learners in the school system, especially because we have dyslexic kids right now. At some point, we had one student who had dyslexia and dysgraphia. Dyscalculia. She was struggling with both. And so we go into the schools, we talk to the heads of schools and explain to them, as I was mentioning before, what these learning differences are and how they and the school could best cater for the students in general, and how to have an environment where all students are included in their lesson planning and how they're teaching. And we've also had workshops on learning differences and learning styles for our volunteers and our volunteer teachers and our tutors who serve the program.
Elizabeth, I have a question for you. I want to make sure that we didn't lose Elizabeth there. Once again, it's really exciting having Elizabeth join us from Ghana. And too bad our Wi-Fi is misbehaving, but I know my Wi-Fi in Virginia misbehaves all the time. So it is certainly something we all have to deal with. So we'll just wait for a moment till Elizabeth comes back. But I think the story that really impressed me about Elizabeth, and once again, we're going to put a link out on AXSChat.com of the radio interview that I did with Elizabeth, which was very powerful, talking about the person Elizabeth was before the accident and her journey through the accident, and also learning who Elizabeth is today. And she obviously is a very strong woman that has a lot to say. She's a woman that, as she noted, has physical disabilities that you can see, and suffered a very, very traumatic brain injury. But it doesn't mean that Elizabeth can't contribute to the world, and she is contributing amazing things to the world. So despite people continuing to discount her all along her path, she's not going to let anybody get in her way. Elizabeth, are you there?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
Okay, good. So Elizabeth, one thing I would like to talk about, and I know that we've gone for about 30 minutes, so we'll have to close soon. But one thing that you talked about during the radio interview that I thought was so powerful was how people treat you differently now based on before you had the accident. And also, Elizabeth, and I know you get embarrassed when people say this, but I just, as you know, I'm a very big fan of your work. And so, I think there are all kind of ways that we stop ourselves from moving forward, but you didn't stop yourself. And I know you were a track runner before, and you understood really how to, push your body. But do you mind just talking a little bit about, how you learn to accept who you are and become this really amazing woman? And I know you're still growing and changing, and you want people to join you, and the support of all girls in education and girls in education in Ghana. So we'll make sure that we put a link out to your organization. But do you mind just exploring that topic a little bit about who is Elizabeth despite getting in this horrific accident? And go ahead, Elizabeth.
So I think I'll tell the first part of your question. I think clearly physically I've changed, but what a lot of people don't realize is the fact that intellectually I've also changed. It takes me a longer time to read material, as I mentioned to you in our earlier conversation, read and comprehend material. And with that, I think sometimes now when people are trying to help me understand something or get me to understand something, they always feel as though, how come she's not getting it? And that's the number one way I believe that I've changed intellectually. And how did I come to accept myself as I am now? It's a journey. I guess I would say it's a journey, and I'm still on this journey. I can't say I fully have come to accept myself, but for the most part, maybe 5% I accepted the person I am. To go from a person who was running track and cross country in high school and being so active on campus, and now the story that I relate to you from this morning, someone looking at me and just feeling as though she's sick, so maybe she can't even walk a step, right? It's a process for me, and I feel the more I live in Ghana, the more maybe I have to convince myself that everything's not like I'm not so bad after all, because I'm doing things that people who are quite able-bodied probably can't do. So it's a journey. I guess that's my answer to that question. it's a journey and it's a process,
and it's a good answer,
I
because
live it each day.
I think life is a journey, and life is about contrast. You know, sometimes, you know, I don't know if, you know, our souls decide that you're going to go through this horrific accident, and, you know, and all that you walked, but you're not letting it slow you down. You are determined to make a difference. And I think, you know, what happened today when this gentleman said you're sick, it was a pity. He was pitying you and deciding you were less than. And I think a lot of the people in the AXSChat community can identify with that. And I just, you know, I wanted to focus on millennials that were making a difference. And when Harris introduced me to you, I just am just so impressed. And I know it's a journey. You're just starting your journey. So who knows where Elizabeth will be at, you know, what you will be able to accomplish in your life. But I think you have a beautiful story to tell, and I think it's unfolding still. And there's a lot that everybody can learn from your journey, because I think sometimes we use all kind of things to stop us from making a difference. I don't have enough money. I'm in the wrong job. You know, I'm depressed, which I really suffer from depression. And there's all kind of things that we let get in our way, including others step in our way. But I think the journey that you're on is a really powerful journey. And I know that you're making a huge difference for the 12 girls with and without disabilities that you're supporting through school. I mean, I recently, yesterday, I saw a really cool video that was put out by the United Nations, and it was talking about social good and women power. And there were women from all over the world, and some were Muslim women, some were African women, some were women from the United States, from Europe, and it was that the Spice Girl song, "Do You Want to Be My Lover?" Okay, but anyway, they had done it in a way that was talking about powerful social good. I loved it. I loved it, and I think that oftentimes, not to diss men, because men are beautiful and wonderful. Antonio is a perfect example of that. But the reality is, I think that the way we have to change the world is to look at your journey and say, wow, that was a really, really tough journey. Should we now underestimate Elizabeth? Well, you can underestimate her, but while you're underestimating her, get out of her way as she changes the world in a positive way. So I love that part of your story. I think it's very beautiful, and it really speaks to us and to our AXSChat community. And let me just ask Antonio. Antonio, do you want to ask Elizabeth another question before we give her the microphone again and let her, you know, have the last say today?
No, what is you have the experience of working in the United States, where you know teaching kids, and now you are doing the similar work in Ghana. So if you trying to find, you know, some balance here and going to your story, what you think, you know, how you can be a sort of a change maker in within the people around you, you know, how people react to the fact that, you know, oh, you are someone that came from the United States, now you are here, how you are able to manage sometimes that a situation that sometimes I believe can create some sort of conflict within the relationships between you and the people around you. How do you solve that problem?
Reconcile that, I would say. I talk to my team a lot about this. Of my team, I think you notice fair, lighter skin than your average or your typical African. I don't look like your typical African because of my family's background. And so the fact that I don't look like a Ghanaian or an African, and then I also come from the US and I have this very prominent American accent. Initially, when I first came to Ghana, people felt as though, oh, who is this girl? Like, who is she? Why is she in this space trying to?
Oh, it looks like we lost Elizabeth again, and we'll give her just a second to come back. But I think, I'm just fascinated with Elizabeth's story, because the reality is we really all can make a difference, and people sometimes will underestimate us in a lot of ways. And now she has all these, I mean, she was Ghanaian, and then she came to the US, and now she came back, and she has the physical disabilities, but she's determined to make a difference. It's just the power of her story and the power of her journey. That's one reason why we wanted to have her on AXSChat. And it's too bad that the Ghana connection is not behaving. But once again, to learn more about Elizabeth's story, please do listen to the podcast. And also, if you like it, write a positive review and subscribe too. But I think we need more stories like this. We need to hear from the Elizabeths of the world. Here on AXSChat, we try to feature the heads of the Paralympics, or, the author of the Americans with Disability Act, but we also want to feature powerful stories that are unfolding like Elizabeth. Don't you agree, Antonio?
Yes, I fully agree, because sometimes it's very interesting to read a blog post about about something or about intentions, but it's more valuable to bring real stories from real life, especially in areas of the world where we usually don't have access to the information or to the exact details about what is going on in there. So it's very interesting to have stories coming from different parts of the world in order to broaden our views in relation to the area and the scope of AXSChat.
I agree. And I know that we've really gone over our time, so we'll go ahead and end now. But Elizabeth is a really wonderful woman that's making a difference, and we're really proud to feature her on AXSChat. I was trying to remember, Antonio, if we had featured anyone with a traumatic brain injury in the past, and we probably have. We've been doing this for almost 3 years this coming November. But her story is just a really beautiful story, and we'll make sure that we put out the links to her nonprofit and the work that she's doing in Ghana so that others can join. And we'll also put a link to that really cool video that I mentioned that the United Nations did about girl power and making a difference. But so thank you, Antonio, for your time today. Yes, and we will continue the conversation. Go ahead, Antonio.
No, we just we know that we are doing this connection between the United States, Ireland, and Ghana. So we know that this type of issues with connections happen from time to time. No, it's better to do it than not to do it. So we assume the risk of sometimes having some issues with the quality of the call. That's how the world is today. It's not perfect. So we hope to see you all on Twitter, and we'll be closing the call for now. Thank you, Deborah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.